To get started, we're in Exodus chapter 18. And we're watching this movement. Now, God has found people that will trust Him enough and follow Him enough to move Him out of the land of Egypt. They believe God for all of the wonders and the miracles that He showed forth, to the point where they built enough confidence in God that they will leave their situations, though they weren't all that great anyway, because they were a slave and a underclassed people. But God allowed them to leave, and they trust God to leave. They trust God enough to go through the Red Sea. But now, going through all of this, even before the Red Sea, when they saw the Egyptian army coming after them afterwards, they began to murmur. And even after they got across the Red Sea, they celebrated, but then when they didn't have no water, they began to murmur. And when they found out later on, after God gave them water, allowing bitter water to be sweet, they traveled a little bit more. They didn't have nothing to eat. They didn't have no meat. They began to murmur. And so they traveled a little bit more, and they didn't have no more water, and then God allowed water to come out of a rock. Now, we're seeing a pattern here, right? And that pattern, I think, is a lot like how we are. We see situations a lot of times that are good, and we just get all happy. But man, can we get an attitude quick? The Bible called it start to chide. I like that word. I'm going to add that word to my everyday conversation. Why you chiding with me? I'm going to borrow that from the King James. But it's just amazing how we just can get there so quick with just lack of thought of where and what God has already done. There's that old song, count your blessings, name them one by one, count your blessings, see what God has done. There's another song that says, be grateful. All those things help us to remember that if we can be thoughtful enough and thankful enough, and you know what, and that's really probably the optimal word. Are you walking in your thankfulness, or are you walking in your present condition? Because your present condition will go up and down. It will flip. So if you're walking in that, you're going to be happy one moment, you're going to be sad the next. And that's what we see with the Israelites. They are up and down, up and down. And so they cannot find any consistency in mood. Their mood is always shooting up, then they're really happy. And that happens because of what they're walking in. They're walking in their current and present condition, opposed to walking in your thankfulness of knowing what God has done and what He has promised to do. So really, if you're thinking about what God is doing and not what's happening with you specifically, you can stay consistent in your walk with the Lord. Now, what we see here with these children of Israel, they are not consistent. And as we continue to go through this, they're not going to be consistent. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a peek into what we're going to see, only because it's important to have that in the back of your mind as we go through the study. One of their concerns was, you brought us out here into the wilderness for us, our cattle, and our children to die. And their concern was for their children. Well, we know, and once again, this is just a spoiler alert. I'm going to spoil, we know what's going to happen, that these grown folks that came out of Egypt are not going to make it to the land of milk and honey. They were good enough and trust God enough to come out of Egypt, and they worked with God in the wilderness, but will not trust God enough to bring themselves into the land of promise. But the thing they were worried about, their children will go through. So it's interesting to us on how the things that we worry about, we're thinking, I got to help get them there. No, really, you're in the way. So the children of the nation of Israel is going through this, and one of the things that they're saying, and keeping in mind that they're saying it just to have something to chide with God about. Their real reason is they just want their needs met. And we're going to talk about needs in just a minute here too. And so they use the cattle and the children as a means of not putting all the emphasis on themselves. But the reality of it is that the children that they're so concerned about will make it through. Why? Because of what they did? No. Because of what God does. And then that speaks to us. What are we trying to do? And we get frustrated and discouraged, not knowing that it's not us that's going to accomplish the task. The task is going to be accomplished by God, not us. Now, with that being said, the story we're about to read today speaks to how God can use us. Because sometimes we can get to the point where we read the Bible and we will look at it and we're seeing how God is doing all this stuff, and it's like, well, what role do I play? Well, you have a role, and you'll see that it's important, and you just have to utilize it properly. And we're going to see how that works today. All right. So we're in Exodus 18. Let's go ahead and get the story read in, and then we'll go ahead and comment on this piece. Exodus 18. Let's take a listen.
Chapter 18. When Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, and that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, and her 2 sons, of which the name of the one was Gershom, for he said,
I have been an alien in a strange land.
And the name of the other was Eliezer. For the God of my father, said he, was mine help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses in the wilderness, where he had camped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moses,
I, thy father-in-law Jethro, am come unto thee, and thy wife, and her 2 sons with her.
And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance, and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh, and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said,
Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly he was above them.
And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel, to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said,
What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning unto even?
And Moses said unto his father-in-law,
Because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another. And I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws.
And Moses' father-in-law said unto him,
The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away both thou and this people that is with thee, for this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Hearken now unto my voice, I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt shew them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. and let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. If thou shalt do this thing, and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure, and all this people shall also go to their place in peace.
So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law, and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land.
All right. So then we have this story, which I think is a very good story, and it's important. Once again, you look at how beautiful the Word of God is, and we watch how these individuals travel and how they learn to just lean on God. Don't lean on Pharaoh. Don't lean on your own strength. Just lean on God. Don't trust in any man. Watch the wonders that God can do. And then God allows them to go through stages of need. All right? So they need to get out of Egypt. God and God alone provides that. They need, once they leave and they get to the Red Sea, then the Egyptian army comes after them because Pharaoh changed his mind. Now they need a way of escape. They're in need again, and God provides the need. He opens the Red Sea and they come through. They're traveling, and it's becoming to the point where they are in need of water, and they find water, but the water is bitter, it's poisonous, they can't drink it. God provides a means by telling them to throw this branch into the water, and it becomes drinkable. They travel again, and their own human hunger and thirst kick up, and they have another need, and God provides it. Well, you can almost then say you get to the point where, you know what? I don't really need people. All I need is God. And God's not going to allow that. Remember, when God made man, he said it's not good for what? Man to be alone. I'm going to make for him a help meet. So what that speaks to is God built into the nature and the work of our relationship with him another relationship where we depend on one another. We have to learn how to do that. So therefore, as we watch this story, we now see the Spirit of God very cleverly and in the proper time knitting in the story after seeing all of our needs being met by God and by God alone, now having a need that we have that we don't even know. Right? Sometimes you have something going on, and if you had another need, you bring it to God. I think if Moses felt like, I got to do something here, he would look up and give it to God. But he didn't even recognize that he had the need. Somebody else had to look and see what he was going through, and then say, wow, I don't know if you noticed this, but I've noticed this. And that's what the good nature of what our relationships to one another are. Because we know that when we have variety of needs that we go to God. But sometimes you don't know that you are in need. But somebody else can look at you and go, you need to take care of this. Right? You see sometimes people walking and they got their shoes untied and they don't even know it. And you tell them, hey, your shoes are untied. You don't want them to step on it and trip and fall. All right? And we can go through a variety of different scenarios and circumstances where, the obvious everyday kind of things that people point out to us. But there are also some occupational, some family, some personal needs that we may have that we don't know and we're not aware of. And we may need somebody to point it out. Now, here's the thing, boy, about pointing out a need about somebody else that they need. a lot of times, what ends up happening? People don't like you telling them about something they don't think they really have a need for. And sometimes you can get attitude, you can get frustration, you can get debate, you can get a lot of stuff. And we're going to see that going along. But in this first instance, it seems to work very well. It just happens to be a very smooth transition from Jethro showing Moses a need that he has, and Moses going, wow, I want to bring this before God, and I think this is something I should do. All right? And wouldn't it be wonderful if all of our discussions and all of our observations were just that easy and that smooth? But oftentimes that's not how it works, is it? It's usually a lot of debate and stuff and fighting back and forth, and let me throw my word in there. We start chiding, right? All right, so let's take a look here. Verse 1, it says, and when Jethro the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law. All right, so now we're going all the way back to the beginning when we first started, when we saw that Moses was was leaving Egypt, and he went out there and he found himself a wife, right? And we remember that story. We're not going to rehash that, but he met this guy by the name of Jethro. All right, so and he married one of his daughters. All right, so that's where this is coming in. This is not out of the blue, but this is part of a few chapters ago that we went through. All right, and so so Jethro, he's number one, he's a priest. So that means he's an individual that believes in the search and the hunger and the desire for the things of God. All right, he's looking for the things of God and looking to help others, and this is one of the natures of Jethro, and this is why Jethro finds it very easy to give Moses good advice. That's what his nature is. He has that priestly nature. All right, and he's a Midianite. All right, and we're going to see the Midianites down the road again. There's going to be a covenant made with them that should not have been made. But I just throw that in the back of your mind. You can keep that, make a note. We will see the Midianites some more. But keeping in mind, he's a Midianite, and he's Moses' father-in-law. He's heard of that God had done for Moses. So he heard everything that God had done for Moses and Israel, and that the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. So he heard about them coming out of Egypt. So, and he knew that was significant because he knew about Moses' backstory. He knew where Moses was before he actually went down there. He understood it. Verse 2, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, that he had back with her. So Moses, remember, when he left his wife with him. And it says in verse 3, and his two sons, which were named Gershon. And the name of Gershon, he said he named this one because he was a stranger. Remember when Moses left Egypt and he had his first son, he was there in that land with Jethro, but he was alone. He was feeling bad. So his first son was a reflection. Yes, sir. Oh, I thought somebody said something. And so his son's name was a reflection of his feeling. I'm here all by myself. I'm alone. I'm a stranger. I'm an alien. Then he had another son. In verse 4, it says, and the name of that other son was called Eliezer. For God, my father, said that he was my help and my deliverer. All right. So, and he delivered me from Pharaoh's sword. So the second son speaks to a development in his attitude. I'm actually going from feeling alone and an alien and a stranger to recognizing that God is here and God is here to help me, and I don't have to feel alienated because I'm here with God, and He's the one that delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. So even in the naming of the children, we see the growth and the development of the nature and the thinking of Moses. All right, and that should speak to us. You know, I think we should also have that same kind of mindset that we should be growing in our interaction. We are all working and trusting in God. We wouldn't be in this study if we weren't. I mean, you would not have that if you didn't care about God. But with that being said, we still should be moving forward. Can we be like Moses? I mean, the way I named my first child and the reason why I did it is different from how I named my second child. I can see my perspective, my thinking, my ideas about my circumstances have changed. He's still out there by himself. He's still isolated from the land he grew up in, but his perspective, the way he views it has changed. So that's a lot of times the big difference. The circumstances and situations may not change, but do you change? Does your vision of how it looks to you change? Because if you see yourself as I'm alien, I'm a stranger, I'm a victim, I'm all by myself. Nobody, the old song, nobody knows. And when you see yourself like that, you're going to live that. But if you can see yourself as, well, nothing has really changed, but I just see myself as a servant of God, and God's working with me. Now all of a sudden, I'm still alone, still an alien, still a stranger, but I do recognize the goodness of God. Now my emotion, my feeling, my joy, my contentment, my stress, all that changes. Not because the situation changed. It changes because my point of view has changed. So I think that's beautiful how the Spirit of God puts this in here so that we can recognize the progression of Moses. All right, verse 5. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses. And I'd like to laugh here because Jethro was like, these are your children and your wife. You take them. All right, now I say that with tongue in cheek, but in our realities even today, when you're raising somebody else's children, a lot of times it's like, okay, well, I know you had a big old job to do, but I'm coming. I see you've done well, and God has blessed you. It's time for you to take care of these little teenagers by on your own, because you know how that can be. And I'm just throwing that in there. That don't really have to be anything from the Spirit of God. That's just me talking human and tongue in cheek. But anyway, with that being said, he brings the children and his wife and unto Moses in the wilderness, where he encamped at the Mount of God. So he's bringing them where he is. Well, where is Moses? At this particular time now, Moses is in the wilderness. He hasn't got to where he wanted to be, but yet still it's time for you to be with your wife and with your children. And that's an important thing. So one important thing that Jethro does as the priest, Moses, I know you got things you need to do for God, but you also need to have your wife with you. And you also need to have your children with you. All right? So Jethro is doing these deeds not because Moses asked him. Jethro is doing it because he recognizes it's right to do. It's time to do. Jethro is a priest of God, as it describes here, and he's doing priestly duty. He's working and doing the things that need to be done on the behalf, not just for his own benefit, but for other people as well. And so Jethro recognizes it. But that's not the only thing Jethro's going to recognize. Let's keep going here. All right, and it says, and he said unto Moses, thy father-in-law Jethro come unto thee, and thy wife and thy 2 sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent. So they did a meet and greet. They were so glad to see each other, and then they came into Moses' home. Moses' home right now is a tent. He's living in a temporary environment. All right? And sometimes that's important to speak to as well. Because there are times you may not be where you want to be permanently. You're in a temporary situation, and that can speak not only to the home, but also can speak to a lot of things, emotionally, financially, health-wise. A lot of things can be described as a tent, temporary. I'm here for the moment. But regardless, though you don't have the permanency of your dwelling place, you need your wife and your 2 children. Your 2 sons need to be with you. All right? And that's an important thing. And there's a lot more I could say up on that, but I'm going to try to get this finished today, so I'm going to let that suffice. Verse 8. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh and the Egyptians, and for Israel's sake, and all the travail. All right, so Moses is saying, he's telling them all that's going on, all the ups and downs, all the difficulties, all the fighting that they had to do, and not just with the with Pharaoh. They had the difficulties with the leaders of the Israel community as well. So there was a lot of different things, but all the travail he begins to tell them, and he goes on and says that came upon them by the way of how the Lord delivered them. So these things came about them going their way as they were doing their stuff, but in all the travails, God delivered them. And therein is the key. I got travail, but I got deliverance. I got difficulties, I got hurdles, but God is a deliverer. So I look for God to do that. All right? Verse 9. And Jethro rejoiced for all the gods which the Lord had, for the goodness rather, which the Lord had done to Israel, whom God had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. Now look at Jethro's continue. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and there's an and there, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Let's keep going. Verse 11. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods. Look at that. Jethro knew something. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Now I know, this is Jethro speaking, now I know that the Lord, this is verse 11, now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in this thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. All right. So when it says that he delivered them out of Egypt, and then it says, and he delivered them out of the hand of Pharaoh. And then he talked about how he delivered them from all the gods of that land. Now, when we were going through the plagues, we kind of touched on it. We didn't spend a lot of time on it, but we kind of just mentioned it, I think, each week as we were dealing with the plagues. How those plagues were an attack on the gods whom the Egyptian and Pharaohs trusted in for their well-being. They trusted in these things to meet their need and not in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And, we talked about how the Nile was a way of just them being able to have water and plants and being able to do wonderful things. And so they worshiped the Nile as a provider and as a way maker. And they went through a lot of, stuff like that. And we talked about that. I won't rehash it again. But Jethro recognizes this, that I see the fact that God delivered you from the bondage of the Egyptians and from the controlling factor of Pharaoh, and then go even deeper, the spiritual entities which they worshipped as gods that were behind it. Jethro is seeing it spiritually. And you will probably notice that I have and I will continue to point out that if you can see things from a spiritual perspective, not just a natural, your ability to lean and to trust and to be comfortable with what God is doing will be greater. But if you only can see it from the natural, then you're going to be frustrated because you're going to want your natural needs met. That's what we're seeing when we looked at the Israelites. They came out of the wonderful deliverance that Jethro's here talking about, but the minute they got thirsty, they're thinking about their natural thirst. The minute they got hungry, they're thinking about their natural hunger. They're not thinking about the spiritual wonder. Jesus often talked about when they said that when they came back to Jesus when he was at the well with that woman, and he was looking all red, like he was good, and they were concerned. Well, who fed him? He's talking about he has food to eat that they know not of. And they're like, well, who brought him food? But he's not talking about the natural food. If we can, to some degree, learn how to fill ourselves with the Spirit of God, it can, if we allow it, override some of our natural appetites. Now, you say, well, Wayne, give me the prescription. How do I do that? No, it doesn't work that way. I can't give that to you. That's you and God. That's something that you have. I can't tell you, well, you read this chapter, read this verse, pray that prayer, you'll have it. It's not going to ever happen like that. You have to hunger and thirst for that. You have to want God more than you want natural food. You got to have. That's why David, with all his mess, naturally, he did a lot of crazy things naturally. God called him a man after God's own heart because of what David wanted, his real desires. He wanted to know God. He wanted to be with God. He allowed God to be his sustenance for the most part. Yet he had his issues. But God pointed it out that his aim is correct. He's aiming in the right way. He may not be hitting what he's aiming at, but at least he's aiming in the right direction. And that's what we have to do. We got to start aiming at satisfying our spirit and not satisfying our natural man. Now, Jesus said, your heavenly Father knows you have need of all these things. When he was comparing look at how God takes care of the sparrow and look at the lily of the field. And he says, God knows you need these things. So God knows you need shelter, you need food, transportation, medical care, whatever else you may need. God knows you need that. But what do you really need? And will always need and will never stop. Heaven and earth will pass away. All right? But my word and will stand forever. That's what you need. You need the word of God, and you need it in you. You don't need it in the mind. It's the spiritual. It's the spiritual. All right? And that's what we have to make sure that we try to do. All right? Any comments or questions on that? All right. Let's move along. Verse 12. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took burnt offerings and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses, father-in-law, before God. So Jethro, he's saying and looking at all this is happening. So he produces a burnt offering or a feast to just acknowledge and to celebrate the goodness of God. All right, and that's something that once again we should always try to do. We should, there's that whole aspect of before you eat your food, you should pray. And sometimes we do that just because, it's just ritual. But it should be a reflection of, I know God meets my natural needs, but man, does he really meet my spiritual needs. I'm thanking God for this bread and for these biscuits and for, whatever else that I'm eating. But I want to really thank God for how he's meeting my needs spiritually, how he's touching me emotionally, how he's touching me mentally. Those are so important and sometimes overlooked. All right? And a lot of times the natural is, no matter how much the natural has, you can't deal or handle it anyway because you have never learned to deal with the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. All right? So those are important to keep in mind. All right. Verse 13. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people. So Moses is sitting down, getting ready to do with the people. Keeping in mind, they got hundreds of thousands of people. They got a lot of people out there. And guess what folks are going to do? You think because the folks didn't have water and the folks didn't have food that they were fussing at Moses. Do you think they got any issues with each other? Of course they do. They got all kinds of problems and all kinds. But this is what people do, man. And what Jethro was about to say, well, you know what? Let's get to it. Let me not try to put any preliminaries to this. Let's just read it. And it came to pass that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning until the evening. That's all day. From the morning until the evening. From 6 o'clock to 6 o'clock, so to speak. 12-hour day. Listening to people's problems. Who wants that job? Come tell me your problems all day long. Alright? Also, all I want to hear is your problems. Well, some of us have jobs like that. Alright? And you learn to deal with it. I mean, one of my things I deal with, nobody comes to me at my job when things are well. They come to me when things don't work or when they don't know how to do something. All right, and I have to, say, okay, well, let me see if I can get it going or show you which way you need to go. All right, and so that's what Moses' situation is here. But this is every kind of thing. I'm just dealing with technical issues. All right, so when they got computer problems or phone problems or stuff like that, that's just one thing. They're not coming to me with their husband and wife problems, their children, their mortgage, their health, all that. I don't hear about all that. That's not my field. But Moses is getting all of it. Everything. All right? From morning to evening. It says in verse 14, and when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did, the people, he said, what is this? He said, what is this thing? Remember, he's a priest. He knows how to bring advice to people. And he's looking at circumstances and situations that could be made better. He's like an improvement ambassador. I see where this can actually be better. Now, what you're doing is nothing wrong. You're not going to be cursed or hurt by God because you do this. But there is a better way. And from my experience and my ability to work and what I have seen, I'm going to show you a better way. Now, you can keep doing it the way you're doing it, and no one's going to arrest you or blame you or anything, but you are working at a substandard level. There is a higher way to focus on this, if you will listen. All right, but let's take a look. He said, what is this thing that thou doest to the people? Now look at what he's saying. He said, the ones that are going to benefit from you doing something a little better is not just you, but what? The people will benefit too. It's important to keep in mind. So when you start doing things better, it's not just about, okay, I'm doing it better and it's going to be a little easier or better or lighter for me. No, it should work for all. And that's how you know when the Lord is in it. It's not always a selfish situation. It's a situation that seems to have a roundabout way of working for a multitude of people. All right? And he goes, why sittest thyself alone? Number one. And all the people stand by thee from morning to evening. So you're by yourself alone, and everybody else is coming to you. And they're coming to you from sun up to sundown. 15. And Moses said unto his father-in-law, because the people come unto me to inquire of God. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the people trying to want to know what God is doing. Inquiring of God is a good thing. All right, but there seems to be an issue here because though they're trying to inquire of God, there is a slowness. There is a situation where it could happen swifter and be less stressful. All right, so those are the things that we have to keep in mind. A lot of the times there is a lot of difficulty in doing things that are well-meaning and you have the ability, but you just can't get to it. You ever have those projects you're trying to do at the house and you plan on doing it, but you got like 6 or 7 of them now. At some point, it's time to okay, you know what? I gotta go. I can't do it myself. I gotta go get somebody else to come in and help me with. Well, yes, that means you may have to pay a little bit. You may have to do a little, go in your pocket, but you're gonna need somebody else to come in and to help you. Right. Go ahead, Mother.
I'm laughing because we're working on a project inside and outside, and we wound up having to get somebody to help us with some of the work, and then my grandchildren came over and helped us with the rest of it.
There you go.
And yes, you have to come out your pocket, but thank God that people are related to me.
Yeah.
They came from Brooklyn.
Yeah. But that's a good example, and so what Jethro is doing here is pointing this out to Moses. Moses he's like, I know God is called me and God wants me to do this, but and the people are inquiring of God, but there's a better way. There's a better way. All right.
Amen.
So where was I at? 15. And he says, because the people come to me and they want to inquire of God. 16.
16.
When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them known the statutes of God and his laws. So he's there to give them the statutes of God and the laws of God. Okay? Nothing wrong with that. All right? And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, the thing thou doest is not good. So he says, now, right off the bat, this thing that you're doing is not good. And the reason it's not evil, and it's not that it is sinful, it's just that you are slowing the progress. It's like you're not allowing the things that God can do, because the people are trying to get to God, but they got to wait in line. Who wants to wait in line to get to God? Can I just find a swifter and better way? Now, keeping in mind, we are dealing with the Old Testament, that they still have not had the situation. We have the blessing that we know when Jesus died. One of the things that was said was that the veil in the temple was rent from the top to the bottom, which then lets us know that we can go to God ourselves. We don't have to have a priest to go to God. We can go to God ourselves. All right. So, but yet you need to inquire of somebody, but is there a faster way? Can we multiply this process and do it a little better? So what Jethro says, this thing that you're doing is not good. Verse 18. Thou wilt surely wear away. Now, the first thing he points out, Moses, your health. You're trying to get these people from out of the wilderness to the land of milk and honey. You're going to wear out. Now, here it is. Jethro's words are prophetic, because we will see, and once again, the spoiler alert, Moses will wear out. Moses is going to lose his temper. Keeping in mind, it's God that's bringing these people, but Moses is going to feel the weight of the people on him, which we should not do. But yet we do that all the time, don't we?
All the time. Yes, right?
We do. We put the weight of people, our wives, our husbands, our children, our neighbors, our co-workers, we put them all on us, and we feel the heaviness and the weight, and it weighs us down, and we shouldn't do it. All right? And so what Jethro was saying, you putting all these people on you, and you're going to let them, that's going to weigh you down. Well, Moses is going to listen, but it's that old saying, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
New tricks, yes.
And so Moses is still going to get worn down, and he's going to disobey one of the things that God says to him, because he's mad at how the people are acting, and he's going to go out with an attitude. And God's going to hold him accountable for it. And so he is going to... So what Jethro is saying here, if you continue to do this way, you're going to wear out. And his advice is correct. Unfortunately, at some point down the road, when we get to that, we'll see. This is where Moses kind of breaks down. And he's going to lose out a little bit because of that. All right? So he says, surely they will wear out, both thou and this people.
Lose out, he up in heaven.
All right? So now, what was that?
He didn't lose out, he went to heaven. He went to the land of milk and honey.
Well, when I say, Penny brought out a good point. She says, well, Moses didn't really lose out. He still went to heaven, and that's true.
Oh,
But-
okay.
but when following the narrative, God told Moses that he was going to help him bring the children from Egypt to Jericho.
Yes.
That was the across the Jordan River, and so that was the plan. So when Moses, just to be a little more, I say accurate with my statement, Moses is not going to be able, because of his action and him losing his temper, he's not going to be able to bring the children of Israel across the Jordan River, because he's going to wear out. He's carrying that weight, which is, we all do that. When you're carrying that weight, man, it's a lot.
You asked them.
But you have to find a way to do what Jethro is saying here, And so, but let's look and see what Jethro is doing. So yes, keeping in mind, like I said in the beginning, what Moses is doing is not evil, it's not sinful, and it's not wrong. It's just that there was a better way. All right, and so that is the key to this chapter. That's what this chapter is trying to teach us. All right, so he says, it's too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. So he says, you can't do this alone. It's too heavy for you. Look at verse 19. Hearken now unto my voice. Now there's the key. All right.
Listen to it.
Jethro is recognizing, I can't make you do this. And that speaks to all of us. When you get instruction or advice, it's up to you. So Jethro is about to say something to Moses, and then he says to him, well, hearken unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. So he's saying, I'm going to give you counsel. And if the counsel is good, God will be with you. And that's the key. He's letting Moses know that the counsel I'm giving you is not because of what I think. It's what I believe God has shown. So he's giving him the experience of my relationship. I'm not a newbie in serving the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I believe in that same God. Now, Moses, you've done you've done stuff I have not done. You took a whole nation out of another nation. You took folks through the Red Sea. And when I say you, meaning you worked through the obedience of God to do this. You've seen the glory of God. God was with you so mightily that you could visibly see him in a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud.
Hallelujah.
Moses, I know that you and God have a wonderful relationship. However, on this issue, I think I can help you. So I need you to hearken. Now, what can Moses do? Moses can not listen. He can get irritated and agitated and be like, who are you to tell me? But let's see what Moses' reaction is. Let's take a listen. All right. He says, let's go back here. He says, be thou for the people to guard with. So he's saying, yes, the people do need to go to you to be able to hear what God is trying to say. All right? Not trying to change that. All right? It says that thou mayest bring the cause to God. You still have to bring people's issues to the Lord. All right? 20. And thou shalt teach all. What are we doing here? Look what he says. And thou shalt teach them ordinances. So therefore there is so what seems to be lacking here is instruction. Can I show you? See, I can put you on my bicycle and let you ride on my seat while I ride you all day long. Or I can teach you how to ride a bike yourself. Then you could get the bike. You don't need me to pedal it for you. You can get on it on yourself. But until that happens, you're gonna have to ride, side saddle, sitting on my seat while I ride. And there's so much we can say. I can go fishing. We can do all the analogies. I can go fishing for you, or I can what? Teach you to fish. So we can see that how that works in so many different situations. And so Jethro's pointing that out. He says, "Thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws." And once again, this is something that we're going to see happen, because Jethro is prophetic here. Because guess what God is going to give to Moses? Ordinances and laws. He's going to get 613 different laws and ordinances, and we're very familiar with those famous 10, the 10 commandments. But he's going to get a lot more than just the 10 commandments. He's going to get quite a few. All right, and so he says, it says, "And show them the way wherein they must walk." So then, once you get the ordinances and you get the laws, how do you then walk in them? How do you then operate in those ordinances and those laws? All right, and the work that they must do. All right, and there's some things. It's not just teaching; it's action. What should you do to be able to make sure that all of this stuff comes together? The teaching, the ordinances, the laws, the actions, and the things that must be done. 21. "Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men." So now you want to look for people that have special gifts, special abilities, because you don't want to just take somebody that just says, "Oh, I want to do it." You need somebody with a gift, with a natural knack for being able to do certain things. But even with that, he goes deeper. "Such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness." So number one, they got to love God, and they got to love the truth. See, if you love God, that's foundational. But sometimes people don't love the truth. A lot of times the truth hurts. People don't want to hear the truth. The truth hurts. Then the next one is hating covetousness. Some people say, "Well, I love God and I love the truth, but I want to get paid for all of this." Well, no, you can't always want you to be compensated. You want to do it just for right sake. "And place such over them," and now you're going to give what? Leadership and instruction, which is what we see Jethro doing. And in the whole makeup of us trusting God, there yet still can be structure of people utilizing the gift that God has given them to help others. So that when you are trying to do something and somebody, you want to go to a mechanic and you want to get something fixed and he knows about cars, it's not that he's better than you, or it's not that he's higher and more beloved of God than you. No, he has a gift and a knack for fixing cars. And if he tells you, put this oil in here, then you should do what? Put that oil in where he tells you. You following what? Instructions. By the gift and the ability that somebody seems to have. All right? But you can't do it because you are always trying to find ways to riches. It's got to be a love of God and a love of the truth. It says, "And place such over them to be rulers over" what? 1,000, some to be rulers over 100, some to be rulers over 50, and some to be rulers over 10. That speaks to that person's ability to lift. Because see, you can have a person that knows how to do certain things, but he can't deal with 1,000 people. It's just not going to work. I look at certain situations, and when numbers get too high, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, that's just too much right there. Let me just slow down. And so you have to know that about. So it's also your gift and your makeup, your gift and your ability to handle the gift with multiple situations. So some can do it with thousands, some hundreds, some 50s, and some 10s. But it's all needed. Jesus talked to that. He talked to that a lot. But we won't take the time to go into that because we're almost out of time here. 22. "And let them judge the people that at all seasons." So he said, let this be something that you do year round. "And it shall be that every great matter," so when a situation is at a level, and you say, well, how do we know that level? Well, we're going to get to that a little later. But to a degree, they kind of know their level. So when you're dealing with things like, stealing or murder or, rape or, high things, all right, Moses, you need to be involved. But on these everyday things that are, what we consider just to be ordinary, let them handle it. So every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with you. People will help you. Take some of that weight off your shoulder. All right, Moses, you don't recognize this, but you're getting weighed down. And Jethro saw it. Moses didn't see it. Moses just thought, hey, I'm just following the things of God. I'm going to God. Jethro saw. Moses, you're getting a little top heavy here. And when something's top heavy, what usually happens? It falls over. 23. If thou shalt do this thing. Now look what Jethro. See, this is how you know this is a good man. He said, now if you will do this thing. He didn't get, you better do it. If you do this thing. In other words, he still leaves the option open that just because I'm saying it, don't mean you have to do it. He left that option to him. And that's oftentimes when we give advice to people, you need to leave them that wiggle room so they can actually do it and feel good about and comfortable doing it. If thou shalt do this thing, and God command thee so. Wow. Look at Jethro again. So, I want you to think about doing it, but I also want you not to listen to me. I want you to take this to God. So if God commands you so, if God says, pay attention to what Jethro's saying there, then thou shalt be able to endure, and all the people shall also go to their place in peace. So now the people will be able to finish it all up in one day. They don't have to wait a week before they can get to you to get to an answer. They can go back to their home and to their tent in peace. I got my answer. I know what to do because I went to one of the leaderships that were appointed by Moses. 24. So Moses hearkened. There we go. All right. Now, it could say Moses said, well, let me think about it, and I don't think I want to do that. No, it said Moses hearkened. It says Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all of Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50, and rulers of 10. All right, so he did it just like he said. And they judged the people all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way unto his own land. All right. So now Moses is on his way, and Jethro is on his way. Moses is in the wilderness. Jethro's going back. Keeping in mind, when Jethro went back, it didn't say he took Moses' wife and sons. He left them with Moses. All right? But Jethro's visit to Moses was very helpful. Jethro's visit to Moses, I think, was very structural and allowed Moses to be able to get an understanding about how you can view the things that God is telling you. So you can look at what God is telling you and then apply it to your own characteristic of wisdom and of knowledge. All right? And that's a beautiful thing. So God told Moses to lead the people out. But now Jethro is saying yes. But look at the variety of ways that can be done and still actually be exactly what God has told you to do. So, can we learn from that? Of course we can. No one's going to change how we serve the Lord. But can we do things more efficient? And can we find that our needs can be met by God through others? That's also something, right? It's still God providing. It's still God doing. It's Jethro talking, but who's talking through Jethro? It's the Spirit of God. And that's an important aspect. So we're going to stop there. We're past our time.